very special guest and a dear friend of mine. And before he starts, I just want to give a brief intro that is about my life and his life and where it crisscrosses. And this is not about me, but just for you to be able to appreciate and to hear from your mashpia about some of the hats that Reb Simon wears. My connection to Reb Simon mainly goes back to the early mems and during the mid-mems when the Hanocha used to come out on a Sunday or Monday before there was Teichen Kotzer and different... it used to come out on a Monday, a very, very rough draft. And it was a hobby of mine. I used to right away read through the Hanocha from beginning to end. And when there was any printing mistakes, I would just come back to the Vad, Hanochas HaTamimim, which he was the main founder and director. And I would give it into the office over there in 788. The office was Reb Simon, Chaim Abrams, Yossi Lu, Arel Raskin, Menachem Shagalov. So that's how I got to know the whole crew. I was always a Hanochas Vad, Hanochas HaTamimim man. And that's how our relationship was in the mems, in the early mems, and in the mid-mems. Then we kept the connection. And then when it was 200 years of the Alter Rebbe's Stalkus, just to give you an idea of Reb Simon, he sent out emails to the whole world, how he's ready to help any shliach anywhere in the world who wants to spread the Alter Rebbe's message. So I was involved with that with him because we're both very much into Tanya. And then 4 or 5 years ago, when the debacle and the fiasco of Kol the Shefa happened, that's when me and Simon really got close. And he saw the threat or danger or disaster for what it was, when I felt that no one else really in the whole of Lubavitch did. My mashal to Simon was, he'll really love this, was imagine you have an Israeli pilot in Israel. He sees 11 Syrian sophisticated jets coming towards Israel, fighter jets, armed with missiles and bombs. The whole Israel is sleeping, and Simon is screaming, "Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!" And the whole country is sleeping, and he's jumping single-handedly into one of the jets, and he's going up there all alone, fighting all the 11 jets, and successfully bringing them all down. So that's the way I really view Reb Simon, that he's always fighting for the Rebbeim, always fighting for Chabad, always, and this is why I think it's a big schus, what we'll talk about today, because he prides himself that he tries as much as possible to give the Rebbe's authentic message as it is to the public. That's his main shlichus. He'll say it, I'm sure, today himself, that that's what he sees as the main point, is to give over the Rebbe's message, the authentic message. Since then, me and Simon are solving the world's problems, Lubavitch, whatever, all the time. And he's also a very, very big maimin. He might also tell you about the Rebbe's view and how Alakus is the only real reality. So without further ado, here's my very good friend, Rabbi Simon Jacobson.
Is this what you have every day, this type of demonstrations? Yeah? Okay, I'm glad to see that Rabbi Winner is still a live wire and doesn't lose his energy. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, so since I was coming to Melbourne, what do they call you, Rabbi Winner? What's the official title? Yeah? Haravagon, Achosid, Amaskal, Avid. What do they call it? Rabbi Yankee. So since he contacted me and said that I know I have a busy schedule here, which I do, but would I willing to come to the YG here, to the Yeshiva Gdela? And he had this idea, because I already had done this for the shluchim, some shluchim in New York, to present something from the inside inner sanctum, from behind the Macheri HaPargud, of my years of working for the Rebbe. So of course we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of answers and directives from the Rebbe himself. Would I be willing to just no extra work? The booklet is ready. Just have to print it out. So, of course, my pleasure to do it, and here I am. So the background behind this is, exactly as Rabbi Winner just said, I had the privilege of working in the Sichos. It means being a chayzer and a maniach. You're probably familiar with those terms, but if not, a chayzer is someone who remembers and repeats almost verbatim the things that Rebbe said on Shabbos and Yom Tov, but there's no recordings and no notes. And a maniach is the second step, someone who places it and commits it to paper. So the truth is, this goes back all the way to the Baal Shem Tov, and even earlier, that there were chayzrim and manichim. Baal Shem Tov, most of his Torah, he said, it was not written. So how do we have it? It was because the students wrote it down. And in truth, Arizal was the same thing. Arizal wrote very little. It was mostly Reb Chaim Vital was his chayzer and maniach. And even more so, every one of you are grandchildren of chayzrim and manichim. Did you know that? Torah Shabal Peh. The whole Torah Shabal Peh was memorized for almost 1,000 years by all the Eden until Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rabbeinu HaKodesh, and the other his colleagues decided it's time to write it down because it was being forgotten. So the truth is that is really the main job. So as a result, I had the privilege to be able to write to the Rebbe for clarification of different points, and the Rebbe himself edited and wrote many different things. Obviously, he can't present it all. So what I did was I distilled it into, let me see, I didn't do this in a while, I think 10 main points. 10 Hora'os that Rebbe taught me about communicating Chassidus. And I presented it actually for the Shluchim, first at a JLI conference and the Shluchim on campus. And it became very popular because there's nothing better than this. This is not hearsay, it's not rumors, it's not stories. It's actually kisvei yad, actual handwriting of the Rebbe, many of them that I personally received, that I collected together and distilled the Rebbe into the Rebbe's approach into these 10 type of steps. Now, I want to just say this. And my main purpose of doing this is exactly as Rabbi Winner said. Many people, of course, respect the Rebbe, we're chassidim of the Rebbe, and we're committed. But it's already 25 years. I'm sure all of you here were born after Gimmel Tammuz. Correct? So many people, maybe you don't always articulate it, but people think, what's the relevance of the Rebbe? I've never seen him. From my point of view, like some people tell me, he's as relevant to me like the Baal Shem Tov. He's a grace tzaddik, but I never met him. I didn't have personal contact. So the big question, which Kedach actually asked and challenged was, just this week, Gimmel Tammuz, when Gimmel Tammuz happened, was Pasha Kedach. Kedach said, Maduat Tisnas, what do we need a Rebbe for? We're all holy. What do we need a Rebbe for? So a big part of my work, the years I did the Sichos, and after the Rebbe had a stroke, I could not speak anymore. I had to revisit my entire mission because my life was entirely orbiting around the Rebbe's Farbrengens. The Rebbe Farbrengt on Shabbos like a clock. So Sunday, Motzei Shabbos, immediately the job began. Even Shabbos, the job began to remember and to repeat. And then a whole week, that was my work. Suddenly, Monday night, a dark, very dark Monday night, Chav Zayin Adar, Tov Shin Beis, 1992, it all fell silent. And for all of us, it was a tremendous shock and loss. But for me personally, there was an additional thing. I also lost a job. Not that anyone really cared, but I cared. And what means a job? Because my whole life was orbiting around this, and the Rebbe was not speaking. So I had to review, what am I going to do with my life? I was already in my 30s, not very old, but I also wasn't young. And I thought about it. I did a lot of soul searching, and finally I came to the understanding, very simple. The Rebbe himself said 6 weeks earlier, before the stroke, that when a Rebbe has a stroke, that's what the Rebbe said, and the Rebbe cannot speak. And he's talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe. The job of those that heard him speak have to be his mouthpiece. We have to be the mouth, the ones that communicate and repeat what we heard. So it's clear to me, at least for me personally, and I think it's for everyone really, what I have to do. That my next stage in life would be to take all the sichos that I had the schus to write, and all those that the Rebbe said even before my time, and to turn them into a language that can be understood by people who don't know Yiddish, don't know Hebrew, who don't know the concepts, and show them the unbelievable relevance of the Rebbe to our lives. And interestingly, just as much as people outside need it, Chabad itself also needs it. Because very often you can get trapped in language and people say, Atzilas, Bria, Mamalaklam, Sevuklam, and I ask them, no, if you're going with Tzoyim, and someone says to you, can you explain to me Mamalaklam in simple English? Most people have no clue what to say. They're trapped by the word, Mamalaklam. So we all know it because we speak, but then if you can't explain something to someone who doesn't know the language, I have to tell you, that means you don't really understand it yourself. This, again, is not my own words. The Rebbe said it a number of times. And what the Rebbe gave us was not just a translation, gave us a way, a method to take ideas that can be very abstract and can be very trapped in haskalah and in ideas and make them applicable. So when I started my life, Chassidus applied, it's not my words again, applying the ideas of Chassidus in applicable terms, in personal terms, in ways that we all can relate to. So this is just one part of what I do in this context. Here it was specifically about how to communicate in general, but especially how to communicate Chassidus. So it's really part of everything I do, which is trying to take all these ideas and turn them into practical applications, practical tools, if you wish, and skills. So I just want to say one more thing before we get into this. My real point is to mention, which I've said already a number of times in my talks here in Melbourne, which I say wherever I go, is that every question you have in life, whether it's personal questions, whether it's dilemmas, whether it's challenges, whether it's nisyanis, challenges that Bochrim have, and so on, everything. I'm not kidding. Everything from A to Z you'll find an answer in the Rebbe's Sichos, the Rebbe's Maimorim, and Chassidus in general. The Alter Rebbe writes that already in his introduction to Tanya, that Kol Eitzes, everything is there. And just to show you that he's serious, he says, and if you can't find it, go to the Gdelim Shebe'ir, as I interpret being the mature people, emotionally intelligent, mature people of your city, and talk to them, and they'll help you find it. I say this because today we must know that. There was a time when we can write directly to the Rebbe, go into Yechidus, dollars, whatever it may be. Today we have the same Rebbe, but it's in his Torah. And the Rebbe said many times that the Rebbe alls bavard. Everything the Rebbe covered. Sometimes you have to dig a little, sometimes a little dig deeper. And I can tell you, though I'm in this work already over 50 years, 45 years, 40 years, I continue to be amazed and I marvel at the relevance I find. I find always something new. A new zettel, a new note, a new diuk. You look in a sikha, and it's amazing. But at the Pasha, the Rebbe covered every part of the spectrum of the human condition. And I challenge anyone to bring something, and you can bring it to Rabbi Winnie, you can bring it to me, and I'll make an effort, if I don't find it right away, to find where is the answer to it. Which is, of course, an unbelievable gift, because the biggest thing in life is to be able to have direction. We're all going to have dilemmas, we're all going to have confusion, we're going to have doubts. We all have our issues, everybody knows. And often the biggest thing is I have no one to talk to. I have no one to turn to. Who am I supposed to turn to for questions? I'm also embarrassed, I don't want to be judged, I don't want to be criticized, etc., etc. So the Rebbe has provided as a real Rei Yisrael, a real shepherd. That's what a Rei Yisrael does. He provides for all the needs. As I said, sometimes you have to look a little more, sometimes a little less, but it's all there. And that's the basis of all my work. Every Sunday night, even right now as we speak, in New York is starting to be broadcast this program that I recorded before I came to Melbourne, episode 267 of My Life Chassidus Applied. And your dear Mashpia here, in his live wire fashion, with, what do you call it? What do you call it? Bombshells? What do you call it? I forgot already. Anyway, every week, now not so much, but he used to, every week I got a Megillah, literally, in an email with bold and paragraphs and lines and this. I actually saved them all because it's like a work of art, where your dear Mashpia takes apart things I said, agrees it, doesn't always agree, adds a point. Evaldik, really extremely helpful to me. And also it was a good vote of confidence. And I've been doing this now for 267, I'm talking about 6 years. And I can tell you that it's working, I'm only doing it because people are listening. I wouldn't do it if no one was watching. I get over 100 questions a week. New questions from people from all walks of life. It's anonymous, I don't know who they are. And around 10,000 people watch it every week. So that's the plug. Okay? Now, what's my point in that? Is because there's a need. People are watching it not because they have nothing to do. Nobody likes to watch Torah usually. They have a lot of other entertainment. And because people have needs and they have questions, what I try to do is show how it's all there. Everything. So with that in mind, let's go to this because we have a limited amount of time. There's a booklet. If you don't have them, I think you have plenty of printout here. And you can follow along, and I'll show you exactly step by step. And here's a perfect. This is actually a sneak preview into the Rebbe's inner world, because usually you hear things the Rebbe said, and this. Here you'll see, in each case, actually a handwriting of the Rebbe. I'll give some context, and from these little manuscripts, we have directives that really can be changed how you communicate, how you learn, how you teach, how you answer questions. Really covers every part of life, which is communication. In our case, it was about communicating the Rebbe's Sichos. But in truth, as you'll see, it's really the art of communicating. So, how often do you hear the Rebbe himself teaching us how to communicate? So, I derived it from these notes, and that's what we're going to go over now. So it said 10 Hora'os the Rebbe taught me. The booklet's like this. You'll see it's page by one. See, each of the items, each of the directives of the Rebbe is numbered. Some of them will have double because I bring a few different notes on the same theme. So I broke it into 10 things. If you look at it, it's the Rosh Hashanah Shliach 10. So I actually connected it to a Rosh Hashanah to make it easier to remember. See, Shliach 10. So I'll just read them all, and then I'm going to go through each one. Sourced, grounded, that's the S, which means everything has grounded and has a source. Heartfelt, sincere, is the H. L, lasting impact. I is initiative, action-based. Applicable, relevant. Clarity, carefulness, precision. Hopeful, positivity. And then finally 10 is transformative and empowering. Empathy and sensitivity. And nuanced subtlety. If you don't know what all these words mean, so I will obviously translate them as we go along. Yeah. That was funny? Okay, fine. Yeah, but you don't see the word mamala kalam, seva kalam, and atzmus here, because the whole kavanah is to translate in the language that we can relate to in very simple English. So we'll start with the first one, sourced, grounded. And you'll see each one, some of them may be obvious to you, but nevertheless, the fact that the Rebbe made an emphasis and insisted that this should be, that just makes it much more powerful. So what does sourced, grounded means? In language of the lexicon of Yeshiva Bachrim and Torah people, it's called Mara Mekamis. But if I had written Mara Mekamis, most of you would fall asleep. Mara Mekamis, it doesn't sound very exciting. But Mara Mekamis means that everything that the Rebbe uttered, every word had a source. And if it didn't have a source, the Rebbe would say Yesh Shleimer or B'derech Efsher. And this is not just the Rebbe, all the Rabbeim. And you'd think the Rebbe needs a source. The Rebbe himself is a walking Torah. The Alter Rebbe needs a mocker. But you'll see consistently that the Rabbeim never said things stam hazeh. The Alter Rebbe writes humbly that the whole Tanya is based on Pisofrim and Pisefrim. If someone didn't know better, you'd think the Alter Rebbe he did a little collection of pieces and stuck them together on a page. You wouldn't realize the revolution of Tanya. But the fact is, everything in Torah has a source. In the Gemara, the Tanoim don't just say things. Menoha Nemila, the Amar Kra. How do we know this? Because the Pasuk says so. And then there can be a disagreement how you interpret the Pasuk. But no one says things tam hazeh. Now you may think this is a simple thing, it's not. I'll give you an example. There's a big controversy about Mashiach, right? People talk about it. I don't know if it's still around. But those that still talk about Mashiach have sometimes differences of opinion. I'm always asked about this, and I always say, we have sources. How do we know Mashiach is going to come? The Eibishter says so on the Torah. How do we know who it's going to be? Again, the Torah. It's not up to opinions. We don't elect Mashiach. If you go by sources, you may have disagreement in interpretation of a source, but at least it's not personal and it's dispassionate because you're addressing it based on what the Torah says. You want to bring a sicha? Gesundheit, let's talk about the sicha. But I hear so many things being said, and I say, where'd you get that? They say, that's what I heard from my mother, or this is what I heard from my mashpia. I say, ask your mashpia, where's the source? The bottom line is sources are not just a small matter. They actually ground everything you say in a mocker. And then you're far stronger basis for everything you teach. The Rebbe insisted on it in such extreme ways. I'll go through the Tzedlach in a minute. Yeah, of course. The Rebbe insisted on it so much, I remember, with Shabbos Bereshis, Tov Shemem Aleph. The second, it was the two Farbrengens then, because Simchas Torah was Friday. And I remember the Rebbe then was very upset that we gave out a Sicha and there was a Pasuk that didn't have a Maramokim. Which Pasuk do you think it was? Bereshis bara lakim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. Now, there's the only Pasuk, everybody knows the Maramokim, right? Bereshis Aleph, Aleph. Or Genesis 1:1. And the Rebbe by the Farbrengen was speaking that you forgot to make a tziyun to Bereshis Aleph, Aleph. And he went on to say, it's not just the Maramokim. You have to know that the Bereshis Aleph Aleph, the Aleph Aleph of Bereshis, of all existence, is that the Eibishter created the world. And you forgot to write that. That's what the Rebbe said that. And I saw that the people don't know Bereshis Aleph Aleph. But that's how it is. Everything is a mokir, and so on. And then we did not write a source for something, just to get a pretty big chelik. Why was there no source? I'll just say one more thing which I find fascinating. A lot I can say just on this. There is a Maimer Rebbe Rashab. Tofresh Ayin Ches, Tetzave. And the Rebbe Rashab writes there that there's a famous concept of Esses, Spheres Agnuzis, the 10 hidden spheres. And the Mosla Yidua and Chassidus, Shalheves, Ksure Begacheles, which means a hot coal, a hot coal, so you don't see the flame. And for all you know, maybe the coal is already cold, but it's not. In it is a flame, and when you fan it, or God forbid touch it, you realize how hot it is. So it's an example. The Rebbe Rashab says, L'cheira, there's a better mashal. The mashal of shemen in a zayis, olive oil. Olive oil, of course, is fuel. And we use it for Chanukah or other times you light a flame. So in the oil, you don't see the flame, but the potential is there. So l'cheira, it's a better mashal. Why? Because you don't even have a flame yet. It's just conceptual. There's a potential for a flame. Then the Rebbe Rashab writes this. It's mind-blowing if you think about it. He says, I'm afraid to say a new Moshel in Chassidus. This is the Rebbe Rashab, not in Tafresh Mem Gimmel, when he just became a Rebbe and he wrote more tentatively, so to speak. Here, the Rebbe Rashab in Tafresh Ayin is talking about in later years. He's afraid to say a new Moshel in Chassidus. A Rebbe, he's afraid, he's the source of Chassidus. Ad kedei kach, the integrity of being true to the Moshel that the Alter Rebbe said. He says the Moshel, but he doesn't want to say it as an official thing. And this he saw consistently. So I chose just a few examples of this. I'll translate them. They're a little tiny here. And so Marmik came. So here's what Rebbe wrote about the Zehirus. I'll translate. The care that has to be taken when you publish something for the wide public. So below, there's the Pinuach where I spelled out the actual words of the Rebbe, and below it is actual Ksav Yad. So you have the Rebbe's handwriting, you see below, and above it is, for us to be able, those that can't read the handwriting, I actually typed it out. But I'll translate it. The Rebbe writes, Hey Rossi Kama Pa'omim. I commented many times, number of times, Sheba Meitzin Le'er, when you publish something for the public, ubefrat kishagam le'ela shele'esat einema nash, and specifically for people who are not till now yet anash, which means insiders, people inside the Chabad world. Sorech lias maramikemis. You have to have sources. Ubemiyuchat, and you'll see the Rebbe uses a lot underlining to emphasize things, and especially. And specifically, not just sources, but especially that there shouldn't be any questions that a person will ask from any other Maimah Chazal or Psak Din. Because if you just write something, let's say the Rebbe says, and then someone who knows how to learn a little says, 1 second, there's a Gemara or a Maimah Chazal or a Psak or a Halacha that said otherwise. So you have to write a footnote, the source, so that way you could see that a person sees, 1 second, this was thought through and considered. It wasn't missing. Didn't miss this point. And then the Rebbe continues, Al kaponim tiritz beremes. Even if you don't find an answer to let's say, the contradiction from another place in the Torah, at least beremes, to hint, to allude that there's something here to be said. Because the Rebbe is writing it, it's going to be published. Once it's published, it's no longer in your hands. And millions of people can read it, and you're not there to tell them and explain it to them. So they'll have a booklet, or a kuntres, or a book that's published, and it doesn't say something, and they'll say, 1 second, what's the source for this? I know I read opposite things. So all this is bavorim, the Rebbe says, is preempted by actually adding sources, and sources that would take care of if there is indeed contradictions. And it's obvious that a pasuk that you cite, or Maimer Hazal, should be exactly as it's stated in the source. So if the Rebbe would say in a Fabrengen, Breishis Bora Havaya, Sheshamayim V'Sa'oretz, even though for sure b'diyuk, the Rebbe has something to say about it, but when it came to a Sicha, if we would write that, we would get such a chelik, like what, he's changing psukim? Even a Rebbe, you don't change a pasuk. You write it as it says. And the Rebbe many times said a Maimer Chazal or a pasuk, not always exactly. Hey, what do you think? You zucked it? Yeah, sure. I said it's small, suddenly I have a big one. What do you think about that? Where'd you get this from? Okay, very nice. Okay. For those with eyesight issues, this will make it easier. Okay.
You only have one as far as I know. Though.
Fine.
But you can make more after the shiur.
Okay. So it has to be the way it's written, not the way the Rebbe said it. I can tell you, just as an aside, many times when the Rebbe did express something sometimes differently, and sometimes the Rebbe was even medayik, and talked about it in detail, we would ask questions. We would ask the Rebbe that the pasuk says like this, or the Maimer Chazal like that, and the Rebbe explained it this way, and the Rebbe would sometimes write entire answers why he changed the Maimer Chazal, but never to change the Maimer Chazal without an explanation. You write it the way it is, and then you say, here's the explanation. That's what. So everything has to be kitzurose exactly as it says it. So you can't quote a Rambam and decide because you have a certain pirush, you're going to change the word of the Rambam. That's absolutely unacceptable. And you can imagine what kind of credibility you don't have any longer if someone sees you do that. Ubafrat benidin dedan, and specifically in this case, Ramasti, which means the Rebbe alluded to, he hinted to. Matzrich bavornish befrat v'din ha'esik b'tzarchit tzibur shalo yukshim shulchan aruch siman ayin u'kamuven leisomu lev l'kol zeh. The truth is, I don't really remember what the Rebbe was referring to, but he was talking about something I think connected to Shleimus Haaretz maybe. And the Rebbe said you have to bavon the din of ha'esik b'tzarchit tzibur shalo. You shouldn't have a question from shulchan aruch siman ayin. So I'm not going to go into the detail because I honestly don't recall right now what the Rebbe was talking about. But basically he's giving an example for this point that he just said, which is that this inyan, I already alluded to, that you have to bavon because the Shulchan Aruch says something perhaps that contradicts what I said. So you have to bavon, you have to bring the sources for it and explain it. And leisamu lev l'chol zeh. And you didn't pay attention to all of this. This was the note that Rebbe wrote. So you just see from here, which is my main emphasis here, is not the details, it's the specific element of the necessity of Mar Mekamis in the Rebbe's own words. And you see, these are strong words. These are not like optional. This is a directive all the time. It's not a Hira Shah for a certain situation. This is a directive that we used all the time, and we followed it to the T. Another example is on the right side of the page. And the Rebbe here goes even further and explains what's the value of sources. That when you write sources, at least some of the listeners, of course readers, it will arouse, it will stimulate that they'll look inside. You don't write a source. Most people are going to be lazy. They're not going to go look it up. But if there's an actual source, some people at least will go look it up. So therefore, they'll also learn additional things. This is an additional reason for sources. Because they'll learn it as it is in the source. Like I don't know if you ever learn Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and you learn how the Alter Rebbe derived it from the Beis Yosef, and from Tur, and from the Poskim before that, and even from the Gemara. It's fascinating, because you see the Alter Rebbe's process. So sometimes the Alter Rebbe tells you, but in most cases you have to trace it, and obviously it opens up the whole Torah in a much more powerful way. Even if there's only one person who's going to look it up, it's worth making it see, meaning giving the source. This is the Rebbe writing about himself. He's revealing a little secret of his own career, so to speak. This is one of the reasons that he says it in the third person, Shamar b'marakemis, that we Like you look at a Sikha, even if you don't know anything, open up any Likutei Sichos, what's the first thing you see? 300 Marbim Kemes. That Marbim, which means increasing and an abundance of sources. Ube Mafteches, which is not relevant, but the Rebbe adds to this. Why? Because the Rebbe was an index. The Rebbe made an index on Tanya, on Torah Art, on the Likutei Torah, on the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab, on the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimorim. The Rebbe made indexes, which, as you know, it's not a simple thing. To make an index requires sometimes even more Havana than knowing what it says inside, because you have to know how to categorize it. And the Rebbe's index was not like others make an index, they see the word Shabbos, Aranga Hak Shabbos. How many times it says Shabbos in Likutei Torah, you'd have an erech of 500 pages. The Rebbe's index is a very intelligent index. He writes about the sugi of Shabbos and so on. So the Rebbe is explaining why he did all this. Bizman shenisnaba hacheshech. In a time when there's increased in darkness and obviously confusion, so countering that, that's why the Rebbe started doing a lot of Marbim Kemes to make sure there's the clarity of the sources and causing people to have to look inside. Val derech hamivtzoyim. This was mind-blowing when we received it. Something the Rebbe is bringing in all the things that he initiated. Talking about Marbim Kemes, but the Rebbe wants to show that there's a common denominator to everything he does. Because the darkness is deeper, that's why we have to add more light. And that includes sources, and that includes indexes, and it includes mivtzoyim. Neisef al de'erev in Chof Aleph Sof Amid Beis, Nun Dalet Sof Amid Beis, there it says that sources are as nayim l'teira. So if you have a source, it's called as nayim, which means like handles. It helps you handle. If you don't have sources, it's hard to sometimes hold on to the inyan. So sources create parameters and makes it easier to relate to any subject. Now, because of time, I'm going to move on. But the point I want to say, actually, I have two more on sourced and grounded in the next page. So we can turn the page. But the point I want to make here, what I say is this, I'll personally tell you the impact on me. Everything I do, I'll take extra time, sometimes hours, of researching the source. Now, I don't always say the source. But when you know the source, you speak with much more confidence and much more assurance that you're grounded. If you speak, I hear people say things. Sometimes they're right, and sometimes I wonder where'd they get this from. And then there are those, when you ask them, without mentioning names, I say, what's the source? Kisvei Arizal. That's like the ultimate joke. It's like someone saying, what's your source? Torah. I took it from the Torah. I took it from Torah Shebiksav. I took it from Torah Shebal Peh. That's the first sign that the guy's an Amoritz. He doesn't know where it is. Kisvei Arizal is a very good one because people, the writings of Arizal. But there happens to be the writings of Arizal, hundreds and hundreds of pages. And the Rebbe never ever writes that. Always Amar Amokim. There's always a specific source. And sources, number one, creates the grounding that you're saying things that are based on something. And if you're saying a chiddush, you can know what the chiddush is, and here's the source, and here's how you're explaining it. And also, you make much less mistakes because you know where it's coming from. That doesn't mean we're all human beings. We all shkiyas miyavin. We'll always make mistakes. But you're far more safe, especially when you're dealing with controversial topics. That's why Mashiach, for example, or other sensitive topics, even more important sources for all the reasons we just read. So it's not a small matter. That's the point I'm making here. Okay, so the Rebbe now continues here, the next page. They're not numbered, but it's still the one because we're still in item 1. So here I'll read this quickly. This is an answer from the Rebbe that he wrote on the side of a page that was prepared, general directives to how to publish. So this was someone gave the Rebbe a book, and the Rebbe looked through it and then gave him directives. How do you publish a book? So this is a hira to everybody. You want to write an essay, or you want to write a book, or you want to write a sefer. These are the rules. The Rebbe himself is giving us the rules. I'm not talking about the My Life essay contest right now. There's more rules for that one. So here we go. Betach hu gezeh ubefrat ateichen. Definitely, you edited this, and especially the content. No, it's not just edited for typos and typing mistakes, but for content. In other words, not you yourself edited it, you gave it to other experts, etc., who looked it over. Van Holis Yeshivasam, I guess this was a kavod that they gave out in the yeshiva. And the Anhola of the yeshiva, the faculty, Kivin Sheshama Huskar Kamapomim Umelim Neisa Ba'achrayas. Since this booklet is being published by a particular yeshiva, and it's mentioned a number of times, so they have the achrayas. So if it comes out in the public and there's a big mistake, who's going to get responsibility? Not just the author of the essay or the maimer or the pilpul or the ha'ara. It'll be the faculty. V'kal lahavin. This is a common expression by the Rebbe. It means it's simple to understand. It's easy to understand. The Rebbe writes it, but he's basically saying this should be self-obvious, self-evident. It's interesting. The Rebbe says eid mumchim, because the Rebbe knows that if you can't rely on yourself, because if you wrote it, you're subjective. You show it to someone else who's an expert in it, and they can make a comment. So I'll give you an example. Rabbi Yael Chezer, the Rebbe once asked him, who does he review the Farbrengens with? So he said, his students. So the Rebbe said, his students, they're bottled to you. They're going to say what you say. You have to review it with people that don't agree with you and are not from your camp. So the Rebbe told him. He told this to me once. Because I sometimes was not always his student. Sometimes I did disagree. Why? Because then you're sure that it's going to be correct. Because if you just hear someone say something, even if you're a big gone, and everyone else is saying amen, and everyone agrees, it may not be correct. When you hear another opinion, it always makes a difference. It always helps to be more objective. Number 2, Valpish Mashanemar, B'tshua B'rev Yates. The end of number 1 here, point 1. That says, B'tshua B'rev Yates, salvation comes by consulting many. Next, 2. B'chlal tei v'nochen. In general, it's right, it's good and correct. Chulu. B'chol zeh kivish and noyad. L'rabim kedai sheyuga edapam. Since it's dedicated, it's meant to reach a public and not just an inside journal, it's worth editing at another time. Levarer hayesh tzedich letzarif olein luach hatikun ekiyetze b'zeh. So after you review it again, I guess after it's printed, then maybe you have to add another page of corrections that may have been missed in the first edit. So it's a second editing, basically. Look at the detail here. And either way, to print, either way, by like putting a sticker in the book, and similar, Bereish Kol Tefis Baruch Hashem. They missed the Baruch Hashem. The book was already printed. So the Rebbe is saying, he's not telling you go reprint it, but at least add a sticker with Baruch Hashem. Look at the diuk, a detail like that. But Omid 11, the Rebbe writes, which means in this booklet that they gave him, Sheyishmeru al Kedushas Ha'olam Kivish Shaboy Psukim. You should write that people should be careful not to throw out these pages because there's a holy name, the Abish's name on it. But that's why you see many booklets, you see that could do sacred texts. Please preserve or whatever they write there. Please don't just discard. Going forward, you must have the editing of a mashpia of Chassidus. So clearly this was connected to Chassidus and people wrote things that were probably not completely reliable. His dabrus imshar hamesaskim b'kiyetze b'zeh, also consulting and discussing with others who are involved in this, b'chdei limnei kfilis, in order to prevent redundancies. Then ask it al atziyan. Again, the Ksav Yad is on the left, is on the bottom, I'm sorry. Now the right side of the page, Likud Meteris Abed. So here the Rebbe is answering, somebody gathered together, made a collection like the way we have. They took different sforim from the Rabbeim and put it into categories, into subjects. So here's the Rebbe writes, Poshet, that's obvious. 1. She'ein hazman groma klal she'ever ve'avaker achemer gam ein ze minyoni. In other words, they gave it into the Rebbe to review. The Rebbe says, Poshet, it's obvious that there's no time that I should review it and criticize it. And also not my inyan. Even if I did have the time, it's not my job to do that. Number 2, sha'inyan balachrayz dela. It's great responsibility to say that you're summing up the Rabbeim on whatever given topic, because maybe you missed it, maybe you're wrong. 3, being that you're taking it from the Rabbeim, you should print in a separate book the actual sources and the paragraphs where you took these ideas from. In the bottom of the page, footnotes. That speak about that idea, b'loshen harav. In other words, if you make an encyclopedia and you say, I'm going to sum up what the Rebbeim say on Simcha, let's say. So that's fine. It's a big achrayus. You have to show it to people to review. But you should have a separate page, maybe the back of the book, or the Rebbe writes in a separate book, the sources. Where did you get it from? And the Lashon Harav, again, to ground it to people to see where you got your summation from. Okay. Now, if educators and mashpiyim in Israel will agree that all this is possible, then, when you have that approval, you have to have one. Look at the extended Rebbe's Bavarning here. It has to be emphasized that this whole likud, this collection, is on the responsibility of the writer alone. He's taking full responsibility. And two, that it's edited by mashpiyim and chassidus, similar to that, and a proper edit. Not like they said to you, okay, I read it, I looked at it in 20 minutes. Then the Rebbe writes, everything that was given to him, he said to return. So you see here alone, just from these 2 pages, we read the precision of the Rebbe of how something has to be published and how it has to be sourced and grounded. So let's move to point number 2. I hope I can do this. Until what time do we have? What's your curfew?
Till 9:05, for sure.
Okay. Number 2 is equally important point, and that is that it should be heartfelt and sincere, which means that when you communicate and you write something or you speak it, it shouldn't just be hollow words. It has to be something that is what we call dvarim hayetzim min halev, words that come from the heart, enter the heart. As the Rebbe brings from the Rebbeinu Tam, just to give you the source, that words that come from the mind or from your mouth usually enter one ear and go out the other ear. That's why we have 2 ears. Whereas if it's from the heart, it's sincere, it has a different type of hashpah. The truth is, I looked very much to find an actual thing the Rebbe wrote on this. I couldn't find, so at least I found a Shichei that's very, very fundamental in this regard. And also a very close point about how to communicate. There's an expression they say, I don't know who says this, but they say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I can tell this to you without even hesitation. The thousands of talks I've given and writings and so on, couldn't be nothing truer than that. You could be the most brilliant scholar and a gone and know all your sources even. And still, people, you're not communicating, you're not connecting with them. And connection is connected to being sincere and heartfelt. Meaning that you feel what you're saying. Doesn't mean you have to be in the highest level, but it's not just talking, you're just repeating and reading notes. You're actually communicating in a personal way. So here, I'm going to just read on Sifhei. This is page 942 in Sefer HaSichos Tov Shemem Zayin, I believe. No, 1 second. No. It's a suffix to Chelik Chav Zayin. That's what I think this is, 942, that's what we'll be proud of. But Kaparim, I'm not. I didn't write what date it is. Okay, I just violated the Rebbe's own directive to write Maramokum. But it's definitely you see from a printed book. I think it's Chalach Elichavs. I think so. I'll look it up. So the Rebbe writes like this. This is in Yiddish, and I'll translate. The Rebbe is giving a directive about, I think 942. No. You know what? I'm wrong. I think it is Tov Shemem Zayin. The second volume is that page. You have a Tov Shemem Zayin here? Okay, I think it is. So the Rebbe says like this. It's not negate the context here, because the point I want to make is this. In order that the Farbrengens that the Rebbe was asking them to make should affect most Jews, the Revam, is das Azach, was in geht zu allem nicht gucken, die Gefschare Chalukim ben Yisrael, as Evis is given by the Ragdome to Matan Teira. Basically, let me just sum up this paragraph. I don't have to read the whole paragraph. That this is meant to be reached as many people as possible, so it has to be in a language that reads, not that? Okay. So it has to be in a language that's understood. So the Rebbe says, can move on. Paragraph 2 there. Paragraph 3 on the first column. Bedarke neim u bedarke shalom, to speak in a pleasant way. That the way of Torah is to speak in a pleasant way, not harshly, not critically, not judgmentally, in a loving way. Umidvarim hayetzim min alev, and words from the heart. Was dafke ze zayin zicher nechnosim alev, and dafke they go into the heart, like you see below. The sources are there. Und das mazbe zayin zu jedem lefi inyoni lefi eifan havanose, and to explain this to everyone according to his personality, according to his needs and his understanding. Taket the ganzen emes from Teres emes, you have to say the whole truth. Aber das Gufa nimmt jeder lefi havanose and leid the chalokim b'teire was erhat shen gelernt. So even though you're saying the truth, it has to be tailored and customized to the individual. Afal pivus vi ali idn hot hashayches to kol haTeira kula. Even though every Jew has a shayches to the whole Teira, has to be specific to his ability and capacity. Mele ABS by Tielis is nit nageya das iberzogen b'shmi. That's why if there's a benefit, you don't have to say it in my name, because if my name, in other words, will disturb or not allow him to fully appreciate what's being said, so you don't have to say my name. The Rebbe is talking about himself. Ubefrat, as we demonstrieren, der Chiyuv v'geid la'inyan von Avis Yisrael steht in alle chelkei HaTeira, that the importance of loving a Jew, another, is in all parts of Teira, Teira Shebiksav, Teira Shebapeh, Allah, Rambam, and Primis HaTeira, b'mele kemen nit jeder and reden leiden chelik in Teira v'achot gelernt unlernt. That's why you can speak to each person chelik HaTeira that he associates with. The Rikir is, am zoren b'darkei neim b'darkei sholem, a second time. You should speak in calm and peaceful and pleasant words. Und dvarim hayetzim min alev, nit mit natzchonos chas v'sholem, not with like, you want to win. Some people make arguments, they want to win an argument. God forbid, that's not the way to speak. Or some people speak in a condescending way, like a teacher, and I'm telling you what you need to do. You tell the person, this is not my idea, I'm not trying to persuade you with my thoughts. All I'm doing is to make you aware what it says in the Torah. And you'll definitely, when you look in it, you'll be more, more involved, immersed, even more than I. That's the point that I wanted to make. So this is common directives of the Rebbe, but here's very specific, a very clear directive, how to speak in a personal, heartfelt way that people can relate to. And the Rebbe said many times that if a person does not get influenced by your words, it's not the person, it's you. Always. Because it's very easy to blame the person. They're biased, they're prejudiced, they're arrogant. The Rebbe always says, if you didn't reach them, it means you didn't speak the right way. It doesn't say that here. Next page, 3. Lasting impact. So here the emphasis on communication is that whatever you communicate has to be in a way that has a lasting impact on the person you're communicating with. So we'll go from left to right again. It says like this. This was the Rebbe writing an answer about how Chassidus should be published in a newspaper. So listen, the Rebbe is sharp, pretty sharp here. It says like this. Tzorech Tzorech means, need a lot of, Tzorech usually means it's wrong, but Tzorech here can mean you need a lot of, how would you say Tzorech? One has to wonder whether this is correct. In biyurim ba'askola, b'sfiris, in explanations in the Askola about Sfiris, meaning the Sfiris and Atzilus and so on, the Esa Sfiris. Mekemon b'michtaves, there are places to be published in a newspaper. Kizeh im shak b'tari b'zeh. They should be published in such a newspaper with a whole discussion about these Sfiris. U'l'cheir masim yeser, for a newspaper which is reaching all kinds of people who may not be aware or understand all the depth and the philosophical context of Sfiris, for them, seemingly is more masim, more fitting to take something from Derech Mitzvah, Mitzvahs Avis Yisrael, V'netak kvar, v'en chashash sheyutfes gam b'michtavei zeh. It's already been excerpted, and there's no chashash that it was already printed in this newspaper because they didn't print these ideas yet. And it seems much more appropriate for the audience. So this simply says that it could be a very true thing, but you're going to go print a whole section from Ayin Beis and then buy a page in a newspaper and ad and say, I'm going to go print it, who's going to read it? And what kind of effect will it have on them? So the Rebbe is basically saying you have to fit what you're saying to your audience. So it doesn't take away from the emes of the spheres, but it may not be the appropriate place in the newspaper to write that. Second settle on the right, the Rebbe writes, Ulai sof sof, this is writing to us when we wrote something in a Sicha, Ulai sof sof yasbiru mishuhu, Yiskuru. Maybe you'll finally hire someone that will explain to you the following. One, Shalakute Sichas va'aoris nitfosim le b'shvil ha'meitzu le'er kim b'shvil ha'amadabar. The Lakute Sichas and the footnotes and the gloss below are not printed for the people who are publishing it, but for the people in the street. What was the reason for that? Because it was written, again, very haskolodik ideas, that the people who were writing it enjoyed themselves in getting the Rebbe editing a certain beautiful idea. But people in the street, people are going to read this, won't know what you're talking about. So this is basically, when you're speaking, it's not about you. It's about the people.
You should hire somebody
Yeah.
that should explain it to you.
Right, exactly. So when you're speaking, it's not about you, what you have to say. It's about who you're saying it to. And if you can't figure it out, you have to hire someone that will help you do that. But not just to help you do it, to explain to you that that needs to be done. So this is pretty self-evident and self-obvious. The idea of impact. It's not just about saying things. We're not standing on a mountain and sharing emes. You're trying to influence people. And you influence people before we read about being heartfelt. And now it's about choosing the right topic, what to say to somebody. So it's an additional point besides being sincere and heartfelt, min alev. Number 3 continues, next page. Another point how the Rebbe is sensitive to how you communicate. This is a very interesting one. Well, they're all interesting, but this was Nigeya in Tavshin Mem. The Rebbe then called for a tiny shos. There should be a half-day fast for the matzav in Eretz Yisrael. So there's always a matzav in Eretz Yisrael. No, probably Shleimus Haaretz or maybe terrorists. I'm not sure. Sakona, they were in some situation of some attack. So a writer, his name was Shlomo Shamir, wrote an article against the tiny shos. He criticized the Rebbe. Afterwards, he didn't say the Rebbe by name. He just criticized the tainis. He says, what do they think that with the Aruchnis, the Ketainis, they're going to solve the problems? We need an army to solve the problems. Anyway, he received afterwards, he apologized to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote him a letter in response, Tezvav Tevis Tovshin Mem. And this is the letter, or at least a section of it. Now, I'm just going to go quickly. I'm not going to read the Hebrew. I'll just translate quickly through it. It says, after I received your letter from Dalet Tevis, and after apologizing in return to you, I'm asking yours, for sure, for a person like you, it's not necessary to remark and point out that when you write something for another person, not to yourself, you're a writer that's being published in a newspaper, and for sure, to Pirsum, something that's going to be publicized to a wide audience. In other words, the point of writing it is in order to be mashpia, to affect and influence through this Pirsum. What's important is mashenigei rak pirushe shalakeda ese. That's all that's relevant is not the intention of the writer, but how the reader is going to take it. That's what the Rebbe is writing to this writer. And additionally, and this is even more important, and this is the most important point, the maskonas, the conclusions that the reader will take from reading this piece. So the Rebbe is basically saying to a writer, I don't need to explain to you, as a writer, that the most important thing is to know that the intention of something being written for others, especially to a wide audience, is not about you, it's about them. How they will read it, and how they will what they'll conclude from it. Then the Rebbe writes another thing. Moving gam, another thing that's self-evident and obvious. That my intention in writing to you here is completely not about how this thing will affect Lubavitch or the relationship with Lubavitch. So I'm not just here to protect Lubavitch interests, the Rebbe is basically saying. Kim, on the shpa of Yadus in general. That when you attack, basically the Rebbe is saying, an inyan of Tainus Shah, it's not a Chabad thing. You're attacking the concept in Yiddishkeit that when we pray and we fast, it has effect. Kail Heira Yidua, including the famous Heira and Teira, Shuvat, Filud, Tzedakah, Mavirin, what we say every year at Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Mavirin Usrei Agzera. The Rebbe doesn't write the end of it. Usually the Rebbe doesn't usually refer to negative things. So this is you're not talking about Chabad. It's not that the Rebbe is not saying you insulted me or Lubavitch. You're basically challenging all of Yiddishkeit. All Yiddishkeit says that Teira, Shuvat, Tefillah, and Tzedakah does affect. And then the Rebbe continues, which is a very common theme. Since Hashem blessed you to be a Sefer Matzliach, which means a successful writer, a successful author, that means that you found an approach to influence readers. So I'm suggesting to you, the Daiti, I feel, my opinion is, you should go back and read the article you wrote another time, and read it now from the eyes and perspective of the reader, not the writer. And imagine, Yeshayah, you can imagine, or what will be the conclusion of the reader. It's an interesting hera, that when you write something, always go back and read it, and don't think how you're writing it. What would a reader think? I do this all the time. Whenever I have something I write, especially if it's something that's more sensitive, I always show it to someone. What do you think? Not whether it's well written, how will it be received? Because sometimes you can't always see. You think this will be very well received, and the fact of the matter, you may be saying something offensive or maybe misunderstood. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. The im yesh malatakan, if there's something to correct, and in some manner, if the conclusion requires some correction. And in addition, ulai gam, maybe you should also include someone that's not a negei b'dover, someone that's not subjective, and does not have deya megudamas, and doesn't have a preconceived notion, in order to get tguva objectivis legamri, to get a completely objective response. So there you have a full directive of how a person should write, and how what you take in consideration, the reader. As I said, all these things from my point of view, this is like fundamental. That should be every writer should read this, because it's not just about sichos. It's a really all type of communication. Next page, 4. Initiative, action. So here the emphasis is the writing or the communication, it's also through speaking, should be one that leads to action. Not just tam diburim, not just tam to write the right ideas. Should always lead to a takeaway message, is the way it's put. Something that we take away in our lives, that people can do something with it. So here we have, well, I'm going to read the right one first, and then there's the bottom left. So first let's start with the right one. This is a very interesting, when the Rebbe passed away, Chaimushke, so this was written by the wife of a man called Irving Spiegel, who was a famous writer in the New York Times. She was a widow of Irving Spiegel. So she wrote a letter of consolation to the Rebbe. It's small, but I'll read to you what she writes, and then the Rebbe responds to her. This is unbelievable. So she says, most revered rabbi. This is March 15th, 1988. Most revered rabbi, please accept my deepest sympathy at the passing of your beloved wife. I wish I knew what to say that would help ease your pain and grief. What words of comfort are there for me to give you, who has comforted so many of us? Sincerely, Esther Basara Rivka. That alone is an unbelievable letter. You know? She writes what can she say to a person who's comforted us? And look at the Rebbe's response. Unbelievable response. The Rebbe circles the words, help ease your pain, help ease pain, and then circles the word, what words of comfort? And the Rebbe writes, listen to this, not words, but actions, ma'aseha, that your actions will comfort me, not your words. Being that you're a widow, and nevertheless you continue your life, living a Jewish life, which would be in the spirit and the ideal, of the husband as I knew him and recognized him, this would be something he would appreciate. Those actions of yours, that you should continue living a life, a Jewish life, in the spirit of the ideal that your husband would have wanted, that is itself is for me an inspiration and gives me strength. So she's saying, what words can I find to comfort? The Rebbe says, not words. I need your actions. Your actions will comfort me. V'hi ratzon, and the Rebbe then says, you should be blessed. The Chag HaPesach kosev v'sameach, right? V'chol hashana kula be'esofa b'chayim hanal. With a kosher and freilich and Pesach, and for all year round, and a sofa in the Chaim, that living this Jewish life should come with more abundance. Okay, the rest is not negated to our discussion, but look at that. What the Rebbe is saying, action. It's not about words, action. And it's so personal. She's saying, I want to comfort you, and the Rebbe is telling her how to do so. That's one. Absorbed? Or we move on? Everybody need a hefsek ben parsha la parsha? Okay, in the bottom left is a different answer. So, huh? Yeah, he's talking the Hebrew name because he writes at the bottom. Oh, okay. Yeah, that could be, yeah. Yeah. Okay. The second note on the bottom left, this is an answer to someone that wrote to the Rebbe that they read Likutei Sichos, and it was a very big inspiration for her. So the Rebbe writes about the word inspiration. This is Chav Tammuz Tov Shemem Ches. So definitely you also read in that Sicha the quotes and Psak Din of Chazal that Amaisa Iker. The bottom line is action, not inspiration alone. Pirkei Yov is the Shabbos Zu. That's the Pirkei Yov of the Shabbos. Va inspiration. She wrote inspiration. So the Rebbe writes this inspiration. Bo b'maisa hamitzvahs b'sofa v'Hashem yatzlicha. So you see, the Rebbe never misses a beat. You think, what's wrong with him? Right to the Rebbe, I'm inspired by your sichos. Now, you read there, I'm sure that Amaisa Iker has to come to action, and inspiration has to lead to action. In that same spirit, and Hashem should be matzliach. I mean, besides all the other directives, this is a real inside look at the Rebbe's approach to things. Everything is precise, everything has some purpose, and so on. Okay, let's go to number 5, next page. Applicable and relevant. Now, I know there's some overlap with some of these directives, but each one is its own world. And here the emphasis is that it should be applicable and relevant. Not just action, but applicable and relevant to the person. So, first we'll do the top right. This is a real bombshell, in the words of Rav Wiener, where the Rebbe wrote the Sikh of Sheftim Tavshinun Aleph. You all know the Sikh about Novi B'Yisrael. The Sikh that till this day is embroiled in all types of different disagreements and arguments what it means. There's a Novi B'Yisrael, and what exactly was the Rebbe meant when he said Yesh Lefarsim. He said to be Mefarsim, to publicize that there's a prophet in Israel that says Mashiach is coming. The whole Sikha, I was able to write it actually. After that Sikha came out, there was a big fuss what to do. Because the Rebbe there said, not just he said the fact, he said the Yesh Lefarsim. So in Israel, they got together and they had a meeting. They decided they're going to put full-page ads in the newspapers in Israel that Yesh Novi B'Yisrael. In America, they also wanted to do it, but different reasons it didn't work out. So the Rebbe, they wrote to the Rebbe, of course, to get Haskama, because it's a pretty strong thing, and they would create plenty of tremors. So the Rebbe wrote, look at this language. If you can publicize this ad in the way that it's in the kelim of Elam Atikun, which means it could be Eres Deteyu, but there has to be in kelim that is relevant and ways that people can understand, but the Rebbe doesn't suffice. And this you need an askin, someone who's an activist that comes from the world of Tikkun. Because you could always make the mistake and say, you know what? A person from Toyu who's going to decide this is Kelim de Tikkun. So you need a person that comes from Elam HaTikkun. And one more condition. And l'achra is bonus, and after contemplation, be'efen de Elam HaTikkun. So the Rebbe really does not leave any room for doubt how this has to be done. It has to be by someone who comes from that world, and that person planned it that way. Because you know what? If you hire let's say a marketing guy, and by Teyudika people pay him, they could say, hey, we want you to write it this way. No, it needs to be on their terms. One second. Let me just finish. 1 second. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say.
Go ahead.
This came out how much after the Sikh? Because
Ver-
the Rebbe said, but if you're on the sky, how the Sikh came out, I thought to myself, this is a throwback to Torah Shiur. So on came Shom Tzimtzum. And here comes this answer. On that Sikh, was nicht nur ein Tzimtzum, es ist 3 Gräse Tzimtzum. And it said, oh, such a powerful, a long life. Like I would tikkun.
But it came out right after Sheftim Nunal. It was right after, a few weeks after. I checked. Shmuel Chafer, yeah, I checked. 1 second. I disagree with you one thing, if I may.
So my question is,
In front of your Talmidim.
we have to, I'm asking, the Chayil is because they manage with the Sikha, because people get up, they quote the Sikha, you see, the Rebbe says, the Rebbe knew it's going to happen, the Rebbe divorced, you see, and he said, do what you want, go with it. So I used to make a joke, so they wrote the Sikha is, I have to get up on Lakewood and say, Sefana Novi is a Rebbe, and that's it. On K222. Here, Rebbe said, don't go to this Talmud yet. I mean, it doesn't happen so quickly.
Okay, hold on. But see, the Rebbe does not use the word simtsum here. He knows the word simtsum. He uses, I would say, his slapshus. It's very different. Which means, by all means, I'll give you an example. In New York, they wanted to put in a New York Times ad. And they showed it to me. They wrote, there's a prophet in Israel who says the Messiah is coming. So I edited it, and I wrote, there's a visionary in Israel who says that the world is coming to personal and global redemption, or something like that. And they had such a fight with me. They said, prophet. I said, you know English? How do you know that prophet is a translation of Novi? Maybe visionary? As a matter of fact, chazain is much more appropriate, and it's also a language of the 21st century, 20th century. Prophet sounds like something 3,000 years ago. And they didn't accept it, and they wrote into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, you should listen to the mumchim. But that was too much for them, because they thought I was diluting it. So that means, that's the point. The point is not, you can say the most radical things, I can tell you that without question. You say it the right way, everyone will accept it. It's really how you say it. So I'll tell you what happened in Israel. I asked. They said, clearly from the Rebbe, he doesn't want it to be done. So I said, why'd they come to that conclusion? We know the Rebbe knows how to write loy mitan aleph. We know the Rebbe writes mufrich legamri. Why did the Rebbe not write loy? Because the Rebbe didn't say no. He knew maybe that they're not capable of this. And they're not. Because people who don't know how to communicate well don't know that you can take the most radical ideas and present them in a very rational way. You just have to say it correctly. Like, for example, I've said many times in public that a visionary sees the big picture. And he sees that the world is coming to a conclusion. And if you explain that, you can say the whole sikh of Sheftim Nun Aleph, and no one's going to jump and go crazy. So then you start wondering, why do we have to say it dafka in a sensational way? So someone said, no, you have to say it in that way because you want to break the resistance. We just read from the Rebbe, it's not about you, it's about them. So in other words, you're not interested in influencing them, you're interested in getting your message out there. I've told this to many people who said to me, why don't you get up and say the Rebbe is Mashiach? So I said, if I got up and said to 5,000 people the Rebbe is Mashiach, and let's say I can say it and no one would blink an eye, and they'd all go home and go to sleep and do nothing, I didn't succeed. To say it, just to be Yetzit to say it, some people feel that it has to be said. And in my opinion, Hepach Lagamri of the Rebbe's approach, because it has nothing to do with the Kalim, of Mekablim. Because forget about Mashiach, anything. Someone gets up, everybody must do Tayyag Mitzvahs. And goodbye, good night everyone. You said something very true, but you're not going to get anyone to do it. There's a way to package it and not dilute it. I understand the chashash some people have, that if you're going to say it that way, maybe you're diluting it, maybe you're afraid. This is what your people say. No, you have to have guy with the kedusha. You have to say it the way it is. And I wonder sometimes whether they really get the kavanah. It's not about saying it the way it is. It's saying it the way that people can hear it, without diluting it. Now, if you feel every time someone says something in a way that is pleasant, and is kabul, and kelim detikun, and you think that's diluting, in my opinion, that's completely wrong, and here's a clear settle. So I would not say this is tzimtzum at all. I think everything could be said. You just have to know what means elam hatikun. You have to know a person from elam hatikun and hizbonus elam hatikun. I would challenge anybody to tell them. I think most Lubavitchers are none of the three.
You're the perfect example.
Halavai. But I think others. Well, the fact is that Rebbe gave a keyach with this. I see this as a tzedel, how to do it, not to do it, how to do it. So figure it out. Right. Next tzedel here on the left. Here the Rebbe. This, yes, I remember this very vividly. I was not pleased. I wrote up a sikha then, and it was the Rebbe's criticizing people who are making fun of mitzvah neshek.
Do you have another meeting all time?
I have time.
Okay, but Rabbi Engel, we're going through the whole case.
You're the boss?
It's in his mind.
Okay. It's all in your head, he says. Okay. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. If you guys got to go, you got to go. Okay.
This is time for dissension.
Baruch Hashem, good. So here, I wrote a sikha. The Rebbe spoke about people who said, Minig avasenu biyadenu, chodesh asim in atera. What's this thing about getting little girls to light Shabbos candles? So the Rebbe, in one of his sikhas, he said then that you don't ask the question that girls and boys today are also reading newspapers, not like their grandmothers. So if there's more cheshech, you need more air. And the Rebbe was critical in a sense. So suddenly we're adding a new minig, which isn't even new, that girls should light candles because there's a darker world. But you say, no, we only do what our grandmothers do. But you don't do what your grandmothers do because they didn't read newspapers and other things. So the Rebbe was a little sharp in the sikha. He spoke on Shabbos. So when I prepared the sikha, I wrote it with some of the sharpness. So the Rebbe wrote the following. Loi kol hanidbar. B'Shabbos keju b'beis HaKnesses v'chulu. Not everything said Shabbos in a shul. Tzarich li's nitfus u'mufitz chutza u'befrad be'el. Needs to be published and distributed to the outside, especially in the month of El, which of course is a time when we have to find limud zchus on Id. So this one, I remember when I first publicized this, oh boy, a lot of people did not like this at all. However, it's coming from the Rebbe, the same Rebbe that you abide by. Because the people say, if this is the case, so maybe there is a story when the Rebbe says something Shabbos, even though he says it to thousands of people in Fabringen, maybe not everything has to be published. And yes, that's exactly what the Rebbe is saying. So how do you determine? Fine, you need to have objective people, Chassidus She'idin, who have the right kavanah in mind, just like with the Kelim de Tikkun, who are not saying we're not going to publicize it because we're uncomfortable. That's not the Vorte. You don't publicize it because the people can't understand what you're saying. So you need to have discretion. The Rebbe says something Shabbos, even though he said it publicly, not everything has to be published and publicized. This is again just the sensitivity of communication. The next one, page 6. Page 6.
The left one, isn't it making the right one is about publicized outside, but in the YG or in our Dalet Amis, we definitely could say it.
Or the Yerdanish, maybe not. If the Kalim can't be makablet or you're just confusing people, it's not about where. This is not a mitzvah of saying things. It's a mitzvah of reaching people that should bring them the day pearl.
What about reaching ourselves?
The Rebbe, that's that you do in Avedis at Tefillah when you're davening into a talis. You can reach as much as you want. We're talking here communication to other people here. This is all about communication to anyone around you.
No, but what about communicating between ourselves? Never say the Sikh in 70 to everyone.
So what you're asking? So what are you saying?
No, you mentioned before.
First of all, I mean, what you have a question on the Rebbe or a question on me?
On what you said before.
Yeah.
That if someone says that in Mashiach, for example, or Novi, it's not the right thing. It says maybe it's what you say is right when you publish it in the newspaper. But when you're talking amongst Chassidim,
By me, the same rule. If you talk among Chassidim and it doesn't do anything, that brings lidei pale, or that affects in any serious way, it's dvarim b'telim. That's how I would say, the same cloud. Because the whole point here is affect and reaching people. The point is not saying things. You're making it sound like it's a mitzvah to say things. It's not a mitzvah to say things. It's a mitzvah to reach people. The Rebbe is giving us the rules, how you reach. There's kelim the tikkun in the zal too. It's not just in the outside street.
I agree. But the Rebbe still said in 770.
No, so.
And prophesied in the Allgemeine Journal that week.
So what are you saying? So what? So he's contradicting himself?
No, I just said that his poem was to publicize the Sincerity.
You're talking now the settle about Novi?
The two things together.
Let's not do the two. Let's do the Novi one at a time. Let's not mix the two.
Yeah.
Here it says they asked in Israel, should they publicize it? So the Rebbe gave 3 conditions.
Correct.
Okay. So you're saying to me what? That you think the 3 conditions are only to newspapers that reach secular people, but not.
That's not the question.
But you don't have a error from the Rebbe that it should not be in Kelim Tikkun for Frumi neither.
No,
it's the same rules.
It should be in Kelim Tikkun. Don't say that. It just said that they're different when we speak outside and we speak inside.
This is a Shakavitayr will have at a Fabrenim. The Zettel doesn't make this distinction. So what you're saying is B'derech Hefsher, maybe you're wrong, maybe you're right. And what means Kelim Tikkun? That's the real question. I think the rule of Kelim Tikkun applies to everybody, even if you're speaking to your chaver. That's what I believe. That Kelim Tikkun is not a chsarn. It's Tikkun da'atzilus. It's Elam HaGedusha. The same God that created Teyu created Tikkun. So why are you concerned? Why do you think Tikkun is a problem?
I think it's a problem.
Everything should be Kelim Tikkun, even when you speak to yourself. Because that's the only way it's going to be Tikkun. Teyu is Vil, and Tikkun makes it into a way that's Niskabel. I'm not sure why Niskabel is a chsarn. You make it sound like it's.
I think it's
So it's not a chsarn in any situation. The question is the audience. I find that even in Chabad itself, to be very blunt, it's Eiris de Teyu, even for our own Bachrim. You say things, and maybe they'll accept it because the Rebbe said it. But I don't think it's Niskabel because it's not Kelim Tikkun, even among our own, if you want to ask me. That's why I think we're here 25 years after Gimmel Tammuz. That's not for now. That is, you need to sit down. Obviously, we didn't figure it out. That's why it wasn't done. There's many ways to explain it. Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is one second, when loud voices of Teyu dominate, and that's the only thing you hear, you're never going to get the way to explain Kelim Tikkun because the voices that are loudest are not Tikkun cases. So they drown out anyone that's going to say anything that is a little Tikkun, and they even dismiss it. I tell you, people have told me, Tikkun is a compromise, they think. Okay, the Rebbe made a Tanai for ever Gzeres HaKosov. They don't realize that Tikkun is the Kavon of Direi B'Tachtenim, actually, not Teyu. It's not some Hagbola. Everyone thinks the Rebbe says Tikkun because it's too shocking. It's not true. There's a world we have to deal with. Direi B'Tachtenim means the Gidrei HaTachtenim. It's the whole Yesod of the whole Chassidus. It's not a chsarn, that's the mile.
Just need to show how to do it.
Absolutely. I said clearly that I think the settle is not a no, it's a yes. But how? So what's no?
I think we could if you have second.
They don't. I looked for it in Israel. They know the person who has it. No one knows who has it. It went to Shmuch. I don't know. It could be by the maskiris here because it was by phone they received the answer. So there was not much force. Yeah, of course, because people question whether it's a correct answer. I know. But I checked. I heard straight from the people in Israel that they got this answer. They even have a Rishima of the Asifa. I'm saying they have a Rishima of the Asifa they had, and that was published back then in Nun Aleph with the answer of the Rebbe in the Rishima. So it's not something that was Nizgalan recently. I didn't know about it. I just heard it recently. Okay, let's go to page 6. Sorry, not page 6. Point 6, clarity, carefulness, and precision. So here's actually, it settled straight to me. My name is on it, actually. So if you read Hebrew, you'll see Simon Jacobson, B'Shem Vad Hanoch Satmim. So this is proof that I once worked in Hanoch. Yeah. This is a very interesting parsha. I'm not going to read the whole settle because it's too detailed. But let me tell you what happened. The Rebbe turned 80 in Tov Shim Mem Beis. Shnas Hashmein. Yud Aleph Nisim Mem Beis. around Hanukkah time, uncharacteristic for Lubavitchers, I wrote into the Rebbe that since Shmeinim Shana is coming in a few months, we would like to give out, L'kovid, the Rebbe Shmeinim Shana, a book of all the Maimarim of Yud Aleph Nisan. The Rebbe said, Tavshin Yud Beis, Tavshin Chav Beis, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, and on. Around 20, 25 Maimarim, I think, at that point. 20 Maimarim. So we want to give out a book of all the Maimarim of Yud Aleph Nisan for Shmeinim Shana. The Rebbe wrote back, it's not here, the earlier tzedel, that Ein Azman Groma La'agiyam, there's no time to edit them. Yatziu Mashu Shelei Tzarech Haga'osi. Suggest something that doesn't need my editing. I never got it set like that. The Rebbe is writing to me to actually suggest something. That was like a hira. So you can imagine, I really took it seriously. I called everybody I know, from one end of the world to the other. What do you think we should do? The Rebbe is asking for a hatzah. So the consensus was, it took a few weeks till everybody agreed upon a few things. And I wrote to the Rebbe this note. You only have the bottom of the note. The truth is, I have the top. It didn't fit on the page or whatever. So I wrote to the Rebbe that I asked a bunch of mashpiyim and askonim, chulu v'chulu, and the consensus was, should give out a book that would be two chalakim, two parts. One is a modern HaTeirah, a section on Teirah, everything about 80 years, the Kapitel Tilim, the Biyurim Chassidus on Kapitel Pei Aleph, and stuff like that. And the second part of it would be a section of collection of articles and pictures of activities around the world inspired by the Rebbe, showing the Rebbe's hashpah in the world. So it was like Moder Teirah, Moder Maisa. Shar HaTeirah, Shar HaMaisa. The Rebbe crossed out, let me see if it's here. No, it's the top of the page. Oh, no. So I wrote all that. So the Rebbe wrote, Loheitzu le'er ha'kevitz u'matarosei teirah. The kevitz should be only teirah. He crossed out anything about maisa and publicity. And then the Rebbe writes himself, U'lechein al ha'seder. And he writes everything that should go into the kevitz. Matzamach Tzedek, Ma'amur from the Rebbe's father, Hatziyunim, a whole thing, and a Teisofa Takonas Abal Shem Tov. So first of all, you see here the precision of the Rebbe as a publisher, telling us literally what should go into the book, into the Sefer. Okay, that was our Atzah, and that's what we did. It was called Kevitz Yud Aleph Nisan, came out. Then you see on the bottom, the Rebbe writes, Ve'ed ve'ikeh. This is very common by the Rebbe, that once you made your suggestion, Asusa del Tata, then came a Asusa del Eila, and the Rebbe came out with his own idea. Ve'ed ve'ikeh, to give out Lahetz le'er Tanya, Atanya, Begedel Rogil, to give out a special edition of Tanya. I'm not going to read the whole thing right now. This is the Tanya the Rebbe actually handed out all night long, Yud Aleph Nisan, Tov Shem and Beis, till 7 o'clock in the morning. Blue and red Tanyas, which the Rebbe, all the details are right here, that it should all have in it all the sharblots, the cover pages of Tanyas printed all over the world. It's a whole special edition. Well, I personally added this because firstly, the Chivus of the Milsa, it's really beautiful to see the Rebbe's approach. He asked for a suggestion. We gave a suggestion. The Rebbe corrected and said what he wants. And that became like the Keli, and the Rebbe said, and now let me tell you what I really want. On my own. And that was the Tanya. No one knew at the time that the Rebbe was going to give out these Tanyas. But then Yud Aleph Nisan came, and the Rebbe gave them out that night as a birthday gift to everybody. So you have here clarity, carefulness, precision, and there'll be more examples in a moment. Tavshin, yes, Tavshin Nun Mem Beis. This was Kapitel Pei Aleph of Tilim. It's a small kuntis, like maybe 30 pages. And the Rebbe edited it. That was the first time it came out. Then after that, every year, they give it out till today. Here is some more precision. I can't tell you enough how the Rebbe, like a surgeon with a scalpel, mamish precision, every word counted in communication. So it's another lesson in communication. So we'll read on the top right first. Here the Rebbe, this was an article in English written about the Menedas in public. So it says the Meneda is particularly symbolic of religious freedom. The Rebbe crosses out symbolic and writes remindful. So you think, what's wrong with symbolic? Because symbolic sounds more like a remez. It's like, it's not the thing itself. And the Rebbe says remindful, it reminds us of religious freedom. Far more precise word. Just wanted to point out. If you look below that, another example. I don't have the ksav yad, but I saw the Rebbe make the correction. The word bittul, such a good word in Chassidus, bittul. So they wrote submission, and the Rebbe changed it to surrender. Because submission is a shvach, submission means like a shibud. Like you're like submitting to your master, you're submitting to someone. Surrender means you're giving up. You're giving yourself away to something greater. And that's the Rebbe's translation of change. And there's many other examples. I just chose a few select to show you the precision. I'll tell you about another one which I don't have. Do I have it? Oh yeah, it'll come a little later. Yeah, I have a bunch of examples. The next few pages are all about precision and clarity. Then the next one, to the left, the Rebbe wrote, this was something that came out by Neshei B'nai Chabad. They were talking about their organization, and between in the booklet they wrote to bring back our mission is to bring back our lost youth. The Rebbe crossed out the word lost and wrote confused. You see the difference? Lost youth is a very negative. Lost means they're lost. You have to find them. Confused means they're confused and you have to give them clarity. It's a far more, I would say even more appropriate and fitting word. So that's all precision. And I can tell you this is like endless. Okay, next page. We're still in clarity, carefulness, and precision. Here, the Rebbe was speaking about. Okay, I'm going to be very quick in this one because it's very detailed. You can read it yourself later. First one is about the French Revolution. So you know that in Tov Shinun Beis, famous Vayeshev Sicha, one of the big classics, where the Rebbe speaks about the change of the nigun, the French anthem, to Aderes V'Amuna, and he speaks how the Alter Rebbe was opposed to France winning because their enlightenment and godlessness would compromise Jewish ruchnius. So the Alter Rebbe supported Alexander, but the Rebbe said, today, after all the Birurim, we can already refine also France. And then the Rebbe said, and that's why we changed the nigun. We took the nigun of the revolution, which was klipa mamish, godlessness, the nigun that represented Napoleon, that Alter Rebbe opposed, and transformed it to what? Haderez v'amuna l'chai alamet. And the Rebbe said, Bashgacha Pratis, after that was done, that was Simchas Teda, Tovshin Lamed Dalet. The Rebbe says, a while after that, because Id Chassidim pointed out that once it turned into Kedusha, actually in France, it weakened the Klippa, so they went and changed the song and changed some of the aggressive words. The Rebbe attributed that to Chassidim changing, Chassidim meaning the Rebbe, changing the nigun. So the Rebbe, as I we read earlier, the Rebbe always wanted us to look up sources, not to just write things. So I called up France. Not Chaz v'Shalom, I had a question that the Rebbe said what he said, but I wanted to just confirm that the nigun was taka changed, etc., etc. I speak to Shmuel Azimov, the head shliach in France, and he says, let me look into it. Because the nigun now is not changed. It's back to the way it was always. So he looks into it, and he sends me back by fax 4 clips of French newspapers. Then the year 1975, a year later, the Parliament of France actually made changes to the song. The problem is there was an election in 1977, I think, and the new president changed it back. So I sent in the newspapers to the Rebbe with what happened, and asked the Rebbe how to write it in the Sikha. Because the Rebbe wanted things to be precise. You can't go right, it was changed, and then you say it was changed back. The Rebbe would want something like that to be, like we said earlier, to bavod and everything, that may be a question. So here the Rebbe wrote the following. L'hachnis kol zeh b'ha'ara. We should write a ha'ara in the Sikha, and write all the details. That in Tav Shalom Hey was changed, and then it was changed back. That's what the Rebbe wrote. Then, on the page where I sent in the newspapers, here's the Rebbe wrote to us. He wrote, Hier eit chadoshes b'zeh al piteva, ve'ein inyanim noch leifen ha-chadoshes. The Rebbe says, Derech HaTeva, there'll surely be new news, means there will be changes, but it's not your job to run after the newspapers. I guess that was referring to I sent the newspapers. I did it only to show the Rebbe what was going on. But basically it says your job is to write sichos, not to check into the newspapers. But Derech HaTeva, there'll be news. This is one of the things that we're all waiting for news. It didn't happen yet. But the Rebbe says it will happen, so I'm sure it will happen. Just interesting. What? They changed it. They changed it back, but they didn't change it back again yet. Not yet. The second note is also, this is a little personal stuff, that I wrote a Sikha, it was Shabbos Chazain Tov Shemem Zayin. This one's going to make you laugh. Guarantee you. The Rebbe's sense of humor. So we all know Shabbos Chazain, Barditchever says that the Beis HaMikdash is shown to every Eid from a distance in order to arouse Gaguyim to want it. So as opposed to Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni, which was destroyed, which was like the child that let the garment that the king's father give him to get torn, now we don't get it. We watch, we see it. So it should cause a yearning and we should want it and rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe then, of course, asked the question in that year, like many times, what's the point of showing the Beis HaMikdash when no one sees it? So the Rebbe went through a whole shakvetari. Maybe it's like the Chruzim. It says that every day a baskel goes out, shuva bonim shevim. So emet shuva. So Chassidus asks, what's the point? Nobody hears this baskel. Anybody hear it this morning? So what's the point? So Chassidus answers, the Basel the Neshama hears it. In other words, your soul hears it, and somewhere it's going to cause. So the Rebbe said you can't say that answer here. Al Kaponim was a very complicated sikha, and we really couldn't figure out what the answer was. So I tried to write it up the best way possible to explain it. And the Rebbe went and corrected it. If you see all the edits on the left, I'm talking on the right side of the page. But here's the main thing I want to point out. The way I wrote it, it appeared, because it seemed from the Rebbe that even though we don't see it, begashmius, but something we do see. But the question is, what do we see? So the way I wrote it for the Rebbe was not exactly the way it should have been written. So here's what the Rebbe wrote to me on the side. Obviously, it's not printed in the Sikha. He writes, on the side where you see in the bottom of the side, right side, the Rebbe writes, Kenira Tofsu Shenemar Sharev B'nei Yisrael Ro B'Poel B'Shabbos Kodesh Chazain Hei Tov Shemem Vov Hei Tov Shemem Hei Beis HaMikdash HaGimmel. It appears that you grasp what I said, that most Jews actually see the Beis HaMikdash. Actually, it's Tov Shemem Vov, not Tov Shemem Zayin. Okay. And you keep repeating it many times. And here's the Rebbe's sense of humor. He writes, Bapashtus, case of Hareshim, Bapashtus, simply the Reshim, which was me, the writer, writes that Shera, that he saw Shabbos Chazain, the third Beis HaMikdash Lamata. He's writing, the way I write it, it sounds like I actually saw it. Which obviously is not the case. And that's what the Rebbe writes. And I remember when we saw that, I couldn't stop laughing. I obviously didn't write back to the Rebbe that, by the way, I didn't see it. Because clearly I didn't see it. But that's what the Rebbe writes, because the way the language is, it sounded like that you saw it. Then the Rebbe went and corrected it the way he wanted. So the Sikh is more or less understood now. I just wanted to point out again precision. You write something, it can be a little off. But here was also a little sense of humor on my behalf, on my account, which was perfectly fine with me. Well, I can't say that for myself, okay? I didn't see it. Okay, next page 6. We're moving along. We'll be finished shortly, okay. Here was an advertisement prepared for Chanukah that was published in the New York Times. I had the schus to prepare it. So I used my poetic license. And I wrote an ad. You see the whole ad here on the left side of the page called Whispering Flames. It's based on the word of the Friedrich Rebbe, was the Lichterlech der Zell. have to listen to what the flames tell us. And I wrote out 5 or 6 lessons that we learned from the flames. That it pierces the darkness. Every night you have to add the colors. The Rebbe, you see, tears it apart from alle Seiten. And above all, the one I want to point out most is the title. So, of course, whispering flame doesn't mean physically the whispering, they whisper to you. I meant it figuratively. But the Rebbe, precision, look at this. The Rebbe writes, Zeloi belachash, ki'im l'chol elam kule. Whispering suggests it's quiet, like you whisper someone quietly. The Hanukkah flames, it presumanissa. It's not quiet, belachash. It's meant to be spread to the whole world. So the word whispering would suggest more of a discreet, quiet little thing, whispering secrets to each other. Of course, it's opposite of the Rebbe's message of presumanissa, public menatus, etc. Oh, it was a big thing because, first of all, a poet I didn't get insulted, but and I knew that Rebbe probably appreciated my poetry, but it wasn't appropriate here. It wasn't so easy to find a replacement. So I think we wrote either Once Upon a Flame or the story of the flame, something like that. It wasn't as poetic, let's put it that way, but it was more accurate. And then there's a few other shinuim that Rebbe writes.
It's amazing because the previous answer, Rebbe, so to speak, is like diminishing, like minimizing your bombastic sort of sensationalism. And here, it's like the opposite.
Yeah.
That it is magnifying it. And he's saying, you minimize it, when really it's much.
And Hanami. We couldn't write screaming flames or yelling flames, it wouldn't really work. So, I'll let you read the other ones, are also quite precise. Just point out one more. The Rebbe writes, I write, the rising flickering flame. And the Rebbe writes, Meir, the rising illuminating flame. Didn't like flickering. Even though a flame flickers, but he wanted to say illuminating. And one final thing, he writes, the variety of a flame's changing colors, because I wrote a Chassidus Shari'era, in some places it speaks that a flame has a little dark blue, has reddish, has yellow, white, the different Nehura Chivra, Nehura Uchma, etc., etc. So I wrote that each color reflects a different part of our lives. So I wrote the variety of flames changing colors. And the Rebbe writes, Ma mishtana. What changes? The colors don't change. It's just different colors. The blue doesn't become white, and the yellow doesn't become red. They don't change. You just have different levels of colors. So the precision, that it doesn't change. Why do you write changing colors? And look at the last line. Every flame tells a story. The Rebbe writes, Ma wachilik mi beineim, shabeneim. The Friedrich Rebbe said the flames tell a story. Not every flame has a different story. The Rebbe said, what's the difference between one story and the next? So obviously we took out that line. So you see real precision. Real precision. On the right side of the page, this is a little more complicated.
I think I want to add, you go from the symbolic reminder and flickering and illuminating, is both of them emphasize impact. Like if you say flickering, who cares? You say illuminating, screw down and bang up.
Yeah.
The same thing as say symbolic.
Good point. Yeah. Point well taken, yeah. The right side of the page I just added for your own edification. It's a little complicated. It's basically a whole piece of the Rebbe, Hora'os, how to write a Sikha. Essentially, the Rebbe says, I'll just be brief, that there's two ways to explain something. One is to explain a psak din, in other words, a conclusion and its reasons. And another is to go to a thorough discussion of the topic, but kol tzdoda, from every particular angle, which forces you to go into detail and details. Details, right. Proti. And the Rebbe basically says that the milah of writing more precise, more short, is easier for the reader. If you're going to go into every argument, imagine having to present halacha and have to go to all the Shak V'Tayim and Gemara, every part. So it's more thorough, but it's not going to be easy for a reader to understand. So the Rebbe writes how Sikha should be written in that context. That it should be done more of a simple approach, meaning give them more the conclusions than all the arguments from every particular way. somebody is a scholar who wants to go into Be'iyun, then you give them the opportunity to do so. This was directive of how to adapt the sikhs of the Rebbe to make them easier for people to understand. Let's move next page. One more clarity, clarefulness, and precision. Actually, it's a mistake. We skipped this page because it's a repeat. It's exactly the 2 pages back. There's a mistake in the first place, so Tosat Fus. Number 7. The message has to be hopeful and positive. So here's an interesting answer from the Rebbe about making cartoons for children. Mashiach Times was a magazine Tzivus Hashem gave out in New York, and there they make cartoons. You know, children like cartoons. And the Rebbe has a very direct shitta how to make cartoons. Hamichtaves, the Rebbe writes, meaning the newspaper or the magazine, is primarily for children, for young children, for youngsters, v'achitzirim, and the youngest of all, little children. And that's why that those who educate them, the elderly who educate them, have to make a decision how to properly educate little children. So the Rebbe says, "B'chlal ein tzarich siyurim de baalei chayim built tehirim." In general, don't make pictures of animals that are not pure. We have a whole sikha from the Rebbe Chav Cheshvan Mem Daled on that. That's one. Then he says, look at this. This is the main thing. Like kedai, it's not fitting or appropriate when you make a caricature in a cartoon of a person, of people, dafke loik hametzius, that you make it exaggerated. You don't make it like they actually are. Shmeinim b'yesa, you make them very fat. Cheitim gadol b'yesa, you make a long nose. This is not the way to do it. When you do something for children, you don't make exaggerated images. You know, you've seen cartoons. They make a big stomach, a long nose. The Rebbe is referring to that. Even though that's become the way comics are made, in my opinion, it's a major mistake in education. He called the poshit v'normal yeser b'negei lektanim mailetve. Whatever is simpler and normal, more normal for children is the best. Why are you making exaggerate, creating false images? You make them think that everything is like fake. And in my opinion, also for Gdelim it should be that way. And here's not the place to discuss that. What do you see from this? That everything in communication is precise. You don't just make a cartoon. Who cares? You make a fat achashvedish. But the Rebbe wanted reality. You're educating children. You're communicating to someone. Give them reality. Don't give them exaggerated imagery. So just a very interesting way of educating.
How do you find number 7 and the Gimmel? Hope for positivity. How do you see that?
The point was that in this case was that what you're doing is something not to make someone laugh, but to give a positive message, a positive, realistic one, instead of a fake or exaggerated one. I just carried it over to that. Maybe it's not exactly. I mean, there would have been other examples. I would have brought them.
I would say the finishing word leaves your objective over the top. Because the fiction, entertainment, and all that. Here they're ever calling the opposite approach. Not over the top, but realistic, like you said.
Yeah.
Normal.
Yeah, normal.
Normal.
Yeah. But listen, the truth is I could have found maybe a note of the Rebbe that focused on doing positive, not negative. But this is also, the idea is that a positive, realistic message, not one that is exaggerated or false. The next one, number 8. Transformative, empowering. So here the Rebbe writes,
I think that people call you for the next function. So
what is the next function?
I don't know, I have what's called the what he gave it. So I think I'm not answering the call. So
Okay, I won't answer either, so fine. I'm almost done. I'm number 8. Well, I'm going to finish. Within a few minutes, I'm done. Okay. Here, the Rebbe wrote, this was on there was a bikur of Baal Pnei Menachem, the Goen Pinchas Menachem Alter from Ger, visited the Rebbe. And we prepared that whole Yechidus and the Rebbe edited it, and the Rebbe writes, Nizarti l'daber b'turatzah, v'shena, v'hafocha, l'pkuda, v'chulu, v'chulu. In other words, the Rebbe, when he spoke to the Gerer Rosh Yeshiva, he spoke in a way of atzah. He suggested things. He told him. And the way it was written was like a command. So you see, the Rebbe was very careful. I suggested, why are you writing like I'm commanding? Again, the idea of empowering a person. They wanted to empower them, not to tell them what to do. So I think that speaks for itself. Next page. 9, empathy and sensitivity. This is a gewaldige one. Really, this is mamish. When I did it with the shluchim, they all were like shocked. The Rebbe gives here directive how to communicate with somebody who may have sveikas or doubts or challenges. Now, who doesn't deal with this? If you write to them, tell them I'm almost done. Is that Yankee, okay? Yeah, good. So here's what the Rebbe writes. Listen to this. In order to influence somebody, especially the young of our generation, of our era, our period. You have to speak to him a number of times. And the specific detail that's necessary. In a way that the one that needs hashpah, the person you're speaking to should not feel that you can't speak that he can't speak up. He should feel free to argue and to respond to you. In other words, don't speak down to him and tell him to do things. Speak to him in a way that he feels that he can challenge you. If you're going to set him up with a mashpia that doesn't know him, or he doesn't know the mashpia, and there's no afsharius to do the above, which means to give him the respect to be able to challenge you, olul gam, it also can lead, God, chaz v'shalom, God forbid, lahazik. It could be destructive. Kivin sheyana, that person who needs hashpah will say, harikvar nifgash, I already met somebody. V'kvar shama, and I already heard what he had to say. V'yotzi yidei chayvosei, and he'll feel I did my job. You wanted me to speak to someone? I spoke to someone. But he spoke to the wrong type of person. V'kal lohovin, and that's easy to understand. V'alov limtze ke'ela she'yasimu le'efen anal. You have to find someone that fits this way, that can speak to him, that cultivates and engenders trust, where he's able to argue with you. Here, that in other words, the person has to be able to feel comfortable to disagree with you. And you have to make an effort to speak a number of times. So there you have mamash, a directive of being sensitive to another person when you communicate. And now we'll do the final one, page 10, number 10. Nuanced and subtlety. Here I wrote to the Rebbe at Zettel about a very deep topic, the famous Shakvetari and Samach Vov, whether Einig or Rotzen, which one's higher than the other. And the Rebbe spoke a whole thing about Ein L'mayla Me'einig, and spoke that there's a difference of opinion. Sometimes Einig is higher, sometimes Rotzen is higher. I'm not going to go over the whole Askol of it. But basically the Rebbe's response was very sharp, because I asked the question that in other places in Chassidus it talks about in a different way. So the Rebbe writes like this. There's no pinuach here, so I'll just read it straight from the handwriting. On the left side of the number 10. Many of your questions recently, and other such questions, are in this terminology, this language. And in that itself, you didn't even pay attention to the contradictions. In everything that the sources you wrote to me, they contradict one another, and definitely are contradictions to other places. And according to Lishitasam, according to your way of looking at things, the biggest klotzkash is, the most obvious question is, that we find common in the language of the Mittler Rebbe, the loy kanal. He speaks about a holy inn, he explains it and says, and this, and then he finishes and says, and it's not like this. V'loy hishmit ha-kanal. And he didn't erase the canal. So why did the Rebbe write a whole piece of Maimed and then come and contradict it? He should have erased it if it's not that way. In Nigla you also find sometimes the Gemara will say something, then say something different. So why does the Gemara erase the first opinion? Maybe sof kol sof, ultimately you guys will look into the beginning of Tanya, in the Haggadah, which says, I am ponim l'Torah. There's 70 faces and 70 different ways to interpret Torah. So basically, why are you asking me contradictions in Chassidus? There's many ways to look at something. Then the Rebbe actually goes on and does answer the question, which is very common. You get it over your head, and then the Rebbe gives you an answer. And the answer you could go study yourself because it's a little more complicated. The difference between etzem ha'enig and ispashtus ha'enig. Shashua melech ba'atzmus, something what enig has that Rotzen doesn't have. But that I'll let you explain to them. Okay, so with that, let's conclude. I'll just say a final note, the following. What you see from all of this is one bottom line. Look how much effort and how much investment the Rebbe put, not just in saying ideas, but how to say them. Because there's no question. And I can tell this to you as a communicator, as a writer, as a speaker. Success in communication and speaking and writing is not what you say, it's how you say. It's all the how. You can say the craziest thing. If you say it the right way, people won't blink. You can say the most normal thing. You say it the wrong way and people will stone you. It's how you say it. And it's all about sensitivity to the audience, the language used, how to frame it. And unfortunately, many people who are not communicators think that if I don't say it a certain way, I compromise it. That's because they don't know how to communicate. Not because they may know the content, but they don't know there are many ways to communicate the same content. So yes, there are people who are apologetic and afraid to say the truth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about true communication. And when the Rebbe says to go to experts, Yedidim Avinim, expert's an expert. And it's important that many people know this. In Chabad, in general, we all think we're experts in everything. I'll give you one example. When Mivtza Neshek started, so they put ads, Mrs. Sternberg, in the New York Times. Big full-page ads, all Jewish women and girls should light candles. J.J. Gross was a writer, he's a copywriter, a marketer. He prepared the ads. So when the ad came from the New York Times, he prepared it with only a woman, not a girl. So they all said, no, you have to have a girl in the picture. The Rebbe says, women and girls. It's not just for women. He said the New York Times is not read, and mostly by women that read the New York Times are singles. They're not married women. If they see a girl in the picture, they're not going to look at it because they don't have children. Now 80% of the women reading the New York Times don't have children yet. So it's a mistake in marketing to do that. They said, no, but the Rebbe said girls. So he said, you know what, let me write to the Rebbe. And he wrote to the Rebbe a note explaining that if you put it in a mother's magazine, no problem. The people reading are mothers. So of course, a little girl fits. But you're putting it in the New York Times or other magazines that are not connected to married people necessarily, it's a mistake. You're spending money for no reason. So the Rebbe answered that you should test both. And let's see the responses. Put an ad in with a girl, see how many people call the number or respond, and put an ad without a little girl. And that what happened? The ad with a little girl had 200 responses, and the ad without the little girl had 7,000 responses. So it was very clear. So you see from this, everyone said, the Rebbe said the little girl, Gzeirus HaKosim. It's not a Gzeirus HaKosim. The Rebbe wants little girls to light. But there's certain magazines or newspapers, little girls don't read them, or mothers don't read them. So that's not the place. It's not Chaz v'Shalom compromising the Rebbe's Heirah. And this is true across the board. Experts will tell you this. They'll tell you, you want to communicate something, great, but you have to know your audience. If you're going to try to speak to old people that are 90 years old about buying a baby carriages are very valuable, but it's not your audience, you know, and so on. You need to have, as the Rebbe, as the Mendel Futterfar said, that the Friedrich Rebbe gave him a bracha to speak bizmane ubimkeme. What does that mean? He said, bizmane means when in the morning you tell people good morning. If you tell them good morning at night, it's not bizmane. What's bimkeme? If you tell them good morning when you see them, that's good. But if you tell them good morning in the morning and they're sitting in the bathroom, that's not bimkeme. You shouldn't be telling them good morning. So Abishah should help we should be the mouthpiece of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says in the Shichy Gimmel Shvat, Tov Shinun Beis, that when the Rebbe has a stroke, doesn't speak, we have to be the mouthpieces and do a Kiddush Hashem. Make sure that you speak the way the Rebbe would want you to speak. And all the different directives we got here in Dvarim HaYetz Min HaLev, and you'll definitely have an impact. And that's our shlichus, how to do it in the proper way. That really is mekaravim and brings them closer and elevates them and empowers them. Thank you so much. All true, everybody. Thank you.
We want to thank Reb Simon for this most unbelievable, unforgettable shiur. And the bracha to him is, like the Rebbe told him in the foot of us, he should continue being Mefetz HaMayonis, B'yitei, B'zmanei, and be blessed on a personal level in all areas of his life as Bonei Chaim Zoini. I would like to also take this opportunity. This is only a hefsek till tonight's Verbringen, in Mitzvah Hashem U'Bezhem Yisborich, at 10 p.m. when the ganze Elam is eingeladen.
Amen.
We also would like to take this opportunity to thank Leon Solveichik for doing his part to make this possible, and also Young Yeshiva. Alles on sein gebencht.
Also Moshe Khan.
Shkoyach. Also Moshe.